This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. And what I'm looking at today is Tenet. And this is a fascinating movie to me because before even reviewing it, this was the movie that was supposed to save the box office. Warner Brothers released this in 2020 despite knowing full well that there's a coronavirus pandemic raging in this country. And the logic behind that decision to this day eludes me, because I'm not going into a theater anytime soon. This virus is getting worse, and it's even mutating, which is to say, there are no movies, or I should say very, very few movies, I'm willing to risk my life to see. Tenet isn't one of them. So that whole episode is really weird. And recently I've learned that supposedly Christopher Nolan didn't want it released at the time it was released. So I don't know what's really going on, but it's the bizarrest thing, and the movie was hurt by it. Though keep in mind something, Tenet is 2.5 hours long. That's right, 2.5 hours. No movie should be 2.5 hours long. And it suffered as a result of that, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to see a movie that lasts 2.5 hours. Well, I'll be fair, it's possible I would, though it's highly unlikely. And having seen Tenet, it does not justify its runtime at all. You could easily have cut that half hour from this movie entirely, and it would have still functioned very well. Though, its greatest problem, I think, is that it's not designed to be watched at home. When I watched it, I mentioned this thing lasts 2.5 hours, I took at least 3 breaks. And I don't mean bathroom breaks. I would stop to get something to eat. I would stop to do anything but sit down for 2.5 hours and watch this movie. And in fact, I had to stop myself from going online via my other monitor to check the internet, because this movie is way too long. It looks great, it's shot really well, but once again, it should not have been 2.5 hours. So let's look at the movie itself. It's typical Christopher Nolan, which is to say that it's somewhat unimaginative, and there's a level of realism to it that doesn't quite suit the material. And could someone please let Christopher Nolan direct a James Bond movie? Because if Inception and now Tenet have told me anything, it's that this guy really, really, really wants to do a James Bond movie. Just with a weird plot device. And that plot device is part of the problem with the movie, because it doesn't feel very well thought out. And frankly, it's just time travel. There's all this stuff about entropy and stuff I don't even remember, to be totally honest with you. But all we're talking about is time travel. And the conceit with Tenet is that individuals are moving forward in time while time is moving in its regular direction, which is to say they appear to be moving backward. And this happens a lot, and it's an interesting visual conceit. Though the thing of it is, it's not interesting enough to sustain an entire movie on. It's fascinating to watch, but it's just not that visually interesting. And there's an odd thing about this movie. If you've seen Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange, do you recall the third act of that movie where Caecilius and his disciples are about to storm the, I believe it was Hong Kong Sanctum Sanctorum? That is this movie. It's really odd in the sense that Doctor Strange, with its twisting of cities and buildings, kind of borrowed that idea and went way beyond with it, by the way. They took it to places Inception didn't, but they borrowed that initial idea. Though it seems that Christopher Nolan then went and borrowed the idea of backwards time from Doctor Strange. But the problem is, Doctor Strange did it much better. In Tenet, it's oftentimes very confusing and not really clear why it's happening. And part of the reason why is that the director himself isn't faithful to his own concept. As I understand it, the idea behind Tenet is like you have to initiate an action, therefore you can reverse the action. Which is to say, if I pick this up and drop it, therefore I could move backward and it would come back to me. But notice something, I have to drop it first. If I never drop that object, or whatever the object may be, it will not happen because it didn't happen in regular time. So therefore it can't happen when time is reversed. And that's the problem with Tenet. As I said, it breaks this rule numerous times. And this is a rule the movie is built on. And when this doctor is explaining this concept to the protagonist, who doesn't have a name and is just the protagonist, she doesn't drop the bullet she's describing. If she doesn't drop it in the first place, therefore it can't come back to her when she moves backward through time. Literally, at heart of the entire concept, as stated by Christopher Nolan, he immediately breaks in the same scene. It makes no sense. Kind of sloppy, to be totally honest, and odd for Christopher Nolan. This movie revolves around this special group of operatives. You don't know who they work for or why necessarily, but their goal is to ensure the world is safe. And someone has, the future supposedly, has decided that they want to end the world. So they have set up this rich Russian oligarch, played by Kenneth Branagh, to get this nuclear material, which is necessary to enable the world itself to move backward. Like what people do in a movie, but literally the entire world. And it's a race to stop him from getting the components necessary to build this device. I want to say, I think it's called the anachronism. No, it's not the anachronism. It's similar to that, but that's not what it's called. In any case, to build this MacGuffin so that the world can move backward through time, as opposed to individuals. This plot is the most nonsensical thing, and it's made more complicated by Nolan calling it all sorts of other things. That he has to make it even more so is a problem. And did I mention this movie lasts 2.5 hours? So it's not the easiest movie to watch, though it is enjoyable in its own way. And the music by the person who did the music for Marvel Studios' Black Panther is just great. It's not sounds in the sense of like noises, but it's not at times actual music either. It's very strange, very hip-hop influenced, and just really interesting. And in fact, it elevates the material and makes the movie even more watchable. Though the idea that anyone expected Tenet to reignite the domestic box office is ludicrous to me. It's just too long, it's too self-indulgent, and it's needlessly complex in ways it doesn't have to be. Though it is watchable though, it's actually really fascinating. I think at some point I might even own it. Check it out yourself, and when you do, let me know down below. Though I say these things only to let you know my opinion of it. You ought to check it out yourself, your mileage may vary. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. To agree, disagree, let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.